Okay, we have to cut out the Lord of the Rings because I have tried writing this script 6 different times now, and every time the Lord of the Rings is just the first one. Every time the Lord of the Rings is the first one, and I think it's unfair for everyone else, so I'm going to remove the Lord of the Rings out of this list. I want you to go down in the comments below and share yours, because I really don't want to make this about me. I want you to understand something, right? In order for me to fall in love with a book, really, like for me to really just love a book, it has to solve a problem exceptionally well. So the first problem is how a lot of fantasy authors do not push the genre forward. A lot of fantasy authors are perfectly happy taking and ripping off J.R. Tolkien and doing nothing else to advance the genre. This has to stop. This is boring. We are tired of books that are just taken from the greatest fantasy author to have ever lived. You have to do something on your own. You have to show why you should be in contention for the, one of the greatest. And an author that fixes this problem exceptionally well with his entire catalog of books is Brandon Sanderson. But let's take his magnum opus, the Stormlight Archive, the first book actually, The Way of Kings. Okay, this book, I love it so much. There is nothing I hate about this book. There is one issue I have, and it's how Brandon just got soft, I think, with the fact that he was famous now and he had 3 prologues for this book. Yeah, he could do whatever the heck and they will publish it. But yes, I think the story in the beginning can be tightened up, and it can be tightened up big time, because the first time I read this, I DNF'd it. I DNF'd it because I felt a lot of what was happening was pointless except Kaladin's story and his struggles with depression. Everything else felt pointless. And that is the only issue I can point to this book. But once you get over that, it's flawless. Literally, in every aspect, it's flawless. Point to an issue with the book after the beginning, and I can easily show you examples in the book that literally are contradictory to the problem that you seem to be stating, right? That's how confident I am in this particular judgment. Okay, so the next one is that the fantasy genre is not serious literature. This is from a lot of literary snobs. They like to say that the fantasy genre is not serious literature, and I hate this. I hate this a lot. One of my favorite authors, N.K. Jemisin, right, with her book, The 5th Season, shows us precisely, in fact, with the entire Broken Earth trilogy, and it has won 3 Hugo Awards, congratulations to her, shows us why the fantasy genre can be used to tell a literary story. But here's where I want to stop you. Here's where I want to stop you. It shows us that you can use fantasy tropes to tell a literary story. Forget about coming up with something new. You don't have to. Actually, you don't need to come up with something new. You can use fantasy tropes to tell a literary story. And this is what happens in the 5th season, where we have this girl. She has a magical ability, and the people are scared of her for her magical ability and her people as well. And the story follows her being discriminated against, and also she struggles with grief and loss. A lot of loss in this story, right? And therefore a lot of grief. And there's a lot of literary styling and elements in here. To say that the fantasy genre is not serious literature is to be blind and a fool at technically anything, okay? This genre is the best there is, and it can really do a lot. Simple as that. I believe this judgment wholeheartedly. And this book is actually one of the most beautiful examples I like to point to. There are a lot of other examples, but moving on. Grim dark fantasy. A lot of grim dark fantasy authors seem to be convinced that in order to tell a better fantasy story, you have to have it be gritty and real and bloody and all of that, and there's no depth. There is no attempt to have more depth. There is an attempt to have more gore. And there is this claim thrown by grimdark fans that, technically speaking, grimdark is the best, subcategory there is because it's the most realistic, right? But that is an excuse. You can't use realistic as an excuse for bad storytelling. Prince of Thorns is a book I read recently, this year, this month that I'm filming this, right? That's why I say I actually don't have any nostalgic influence in my choices of which ones are in my top 5. Number 2, my top 5 shifts a lot, okay? Moving on, with Prince of Thorns, we have a grimdark book. Of course, it has blood, violence, gore, but Mark Lawrence adds a lot of depth to it with Jorg Ankrath and his struggle with vengeance, with loss of his mother and his younger brother. And technically speaking, this story is one of the best depictions of how vengeance can consume someone I have ever seen in my life. And then there is world building for the sake of world building. A lot of fantasy has this. Info dumping until I'm just literally skimming over the chapters. Literally, I sometimes skim entire chapters. If the book is famous enough, I will actually go out there and look for a reading guide. A guide that shows which chapters are, irrelevant and which chapters are relevant. There is a book that fixes this problem, Lies of Locke Lamora, the first book in the Gentleman Bastards books, right? And with this book, what Scott Lynch achieves is tell a story with the world building. The city of Comore, just one city, right? There's not a lot of info dumping in the story, technically is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, with the city of Comore, you have world building that first of all helps to tell the story, but number two is not there just because it's epic world building, right? And as the author yourself, what I want you to do is include stuff that is only relevant for the story, right? And then there is the Epic of Epics, A Game of Thrones, the first book in A Song of Ice and Fire. And guess what? This one has been in my favorite list ever since 2017. And technically speaking, the reason why I love it is because you see all the problems I have listed, all these books that solve all of these problems, this book solves all of them collectively. You see, it has world building that is not info dump, first of all, but number two, it tells a story. And then there is the advantage of The Way of Kings, where Brandon Sanderson has a very unique take on the genre. Well, guess what? This story, even though George R. R. Martin is a fan of the Lord of the Rings, he was raised on the Lord of the Rings, and he is a fan of J.R. Tolkien. He does not really steal from J.R. Tolkien. He respects him. He has tips of the hat to J.R. Tolkien, but a lot of the story that what happens in it is unique. A lot of the world building on top of that is also unique. And then there is a lot of the literary elements in this story. A lot of people don't really try to examine the themes that George does, but yes, he examines them exceptionally well. The only issue is the prose, right? It's really difficult to follow George's style of writing. But yeah, other than that, it's the perfect book in my eyes. It does everything I like. Okay, just the prose, just the writing style is the only issue, right? So yes, those are my favorite 5 books in the fantasy genre. In few months, it might be completely different. I'm like that. Lies of Locke Lamora and Prince of Thorns, I read them in this month, and I added them to my top list this month. Okay, so yeah, like if I read a book and I really love it, I'm going to remove another one that I liked less. Okay, so I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope you took something from it. I don't want to make this about myself alone, so I want you to go down in the comments below and tell me what are your favorite fantasy books. I hope you have a nice day.